Hey guys, Dr. Decks here. Today I'm gonna talk about some of my favorite decks that I've ever built. Like maybe top 5. Like I can't really choose, they're like children, right? For me, it's like I have like favorite decks that I've built, but I don't know if I could actually give you my top 5, but I'm gonna try. I'm gonna give you 5 decks that I think I've done some really amazing work on and share that information with you, talk about each one a little bit, and you can agree or disagree with me in the comments below, so don't forget to, okay? And if you like this video, hit that subscribe button, please. Thank you for that in advance. Oh, and a lot of these decks, I think every single one of them probably has some form of deck board bending in it. It's my favorite thing to do as a deck builder. If you've never heard of deck board bending or you don't know what it is, just go to Google and put in the hashtag sign, the pound sign, and type in deck board bending and see what pops up. All right, before we continue, I'd like to tell you about some samples that Maximo Woods just sent us, some really cool feature wall products that I just can't get enough of. These are actually milled out of a 2x6, and this is clear iOS products, and there's 2 different types. There's a double flute and a triple flute. You can mix these 2 together and make a really cool feature wall. But my favorite, my absolute favorite is this one here. This is called Skyline, and this is made out of clear radiata. Also can be made out of iOS as well. And again, it's milled out of a 2x6, thermally modified, completely stable, really awesome product. And I've seen this in a complete feature wall. I want to be doing one of these in my house somewhere as well because this is awesome. Then they also sent me some really cool samples of these 3 boards. They're called a nickel gap, so there's a little gap in between. This is clear radiata as well, and also done in a couple different finishes that you can all purchase from Lumber Plus. Don't forget to look them up, guys. Thanks for watching, and let's get back to the video. All right, so this first deck that I built, I don't remember the year. This is probably 10 years ago or so. It's a double curved, 2 different radiuses, and it was a very small backyard, and the client was really wanting something unique. And they pretty much said, hey, do whatever you want, just impress us with the design. So they actually paid me for a design, and most of these decks that we're gonna talk about in this video had a design featured before we actually built anything. So this deck here has 2 different radiuses, has a curved bench, curved steps, and then a curved step with a flared curved bench. This whole deck, I designed it around a pizza oven. The clients they loved to cook pizza on their little pizza oven. So I actually built them a little bar that was curved as well. So all the top boards on the bar were curved. The back of the bar was curved. We did a trellis above the bar just as a visual effect. All that was curved, and it was all done out of PVC. And then PVC wrapped, there was pressure treated posts, and we put PVC post sleeves over those and made a really cool trellis that I custom cut all the PVC, and we painted all the end grains and routed it all up and made it look really nice. And then below that, we made a rolling panel that they could put stuff on and roll it out and gain access to it, and then roll it back in and be able to put it back inside the shelves in the inside this cabinet, this open face cabinet that we did. Lots of deck board bending, and then we put some inlight lights in it. A couple mostly down the stairs and in the bench. And we used 2 colors on this deck. Looks like this deck was done in AZEK, TimberTech AZEK. And the field color was probably cypress, or it was English walnut, and then it was dark hickory for the trim. So that was a really cool deck. I won a first place trophy in the National Deck Building Competition with that deck. It was a lower budget, so I was able, it didn't take best of show, but it did take first place for its category. So I was very proud of that. All right, next deck has to be this one in North Tacoma that we built. It was built probably in 2019. It looks like these photos finished in 2019. It was a multi-tiered deck on a steep hill, so it had a really unique set of footings, which is called a diamond pier. And the diamond pier people actually came out and helped us install these piers into the hill before we started building the deck. And we actually have a YouTube video about that footing install, and it's done rather well. So check that out as well if you want to see how we put the footings in the ground on this particular job. That was the most challenging part, was actually building up off a cliff, or a hill, not a cliff, but a hill, pretty steep hill. There's some really cool deck board bending, multiple levels. So the upper deck starts from the side yard, and then it ties into where the kitchen goes, and then it projects out about 16 feet to 20 feet. And then there's a couple steps, and then the center, the step disappears. So it's a seating area for a fire pit. And then the lower deck has enough room for furniture and lounge chairs and things like that. And then there's this Regal Ideas crystal rail. So you have this killer view of Puget Sound from this deck, and there's nothing that impedes the view. And again, now this deck took first place in the biggest category that they had, like, you know, 200,000 to 100, well, I think it was like up to 150K. This deck took first place again, national deck building competition. I'm really proud of it. It has English walnut, AZEK English walnut for the field, and dark hickory borders. A real pretty job, one of my favorites. Let's go to one of the biggest decks I've ever built. This deck was a monster. This deck took 7 months to build with just 2 guys. Just 2 guys built this deck in about 7 months. And it just took a long time, and it evolved as we were building it. So it was big everything, big footings, big rebar, big posts. The posts on this deck had to be structural. So, which means you can't just use a regular 6x6. We had to use engineered posts because of the weight. The main deck only had 4 posts that suspended the entire deck. We used big glue lamps, big posts, and then we went up another level, and I think there was 3 more posts on top of that. It's kind of hard to remember. 2 outdoor barbecues, one on the main level, one on the lower level, and then a really unique way of exiting this deck, coming down a beautiful set of stairs onto another circular deck that then I built some curved stairs to get down to the yard. Just a really awesome project, full lighting, miles of wires. We had heaters in this deck. We had a mechanical company come in and do all the gas piping. There was a fireplace on the upstairs deck and a hot tub that we had to have craned into position. We did a privacy wall with an outdoor fireplace so she could sit in her hot tub and burn a fire and look through the fireplace at the lake. There was frameless glass with stanchions and then curved glass going around all of the sections of the deck, which I think this was my first curved glass deck installation. This is back in 2018, and I think there was curved glass on 3 different levels of this deck. And then we also did a dock for the client. So I think the total square footage was close to 3,000 with the main deck, the upper deck, the lower deck, and the dock. And that's why it took us so long. The coolest part that you can't even see about this deck, we had to create a steel I-beam that would take 4 feet of cantilever that we bolted to the side of the house and to the glue lamb and tied it into the framing, and then it cantilevered 4 feet to create this 20-some foot radius. So she didn't want to post in the middle of the deck where this deck cantilevers out. It had to be engineered. It was crazy. I don't know if I have the mental capacity to build that, well, except for the deck I'm building right now, but it was a lot of effort. And I have a small little video that we'll insert into this video showing you, we had 2 mechanical lifts, and I had a bobcat on site. So we'd lift everything up to the first level. I had to invert my forks on my bobcat to get an extra 2 feet of lift. With that extra 2 feet of lift, we were able to just barely get the beams up onto the upper deck, and then we used pipe and we rolled it into place, and then we used these mechanical lifts, 2 of them, to get it up another 10 feet in the air, and then we bolted it to the house. It was quite crazy, but the reward was worth it when we were finished, because it really, I mean, most people won't catch it, but when you look at this deck and you see this cantilever, you kind of scratch your head, because it's just the deck curves away from the house and then comes back to a beam, and there's like 4 feet of nothing. It's like it's just suspended in midair. That's probably the most crazy deck I've ever built, and rightfully so. It's amazing. They had back then in 2018, the frameless door, or what kind of infinity doors or whatever you want to call them, were really popular. And I think they still are. But wow, man, that was just lights out incredible. So this next one is one of my favorites because the client, we built them a deck in their front yard several years ago. And it was a small little deck. And then they had to have their septic tank replaced. So they had to tear the deck out, tear out the septic tank. They had all these septic lids. The client calls me back and says, hey man, I want you to outdo yourself. It was kind of cool. It had a couple curves, had like a little fishtail thing going on. It was kind of a neat looking deck. And they said, we want you to go all in, like do whatever you want. So I designed this really cool curvy deck. The decking was AZEK, and it was just one of their standard collections. It wasn't the fancy collection. We had 3 septic tank lids in this deck. I call this deck the alien crop circle because that's what it looks like. When you look at this deck, it looks like aliens came in and put crop circles in the deck. A septic tank lid is 26 inches in diameter, which means that's a 13-inch radius. And I, in my infinite wisdom, decided I wanted to bend these deck boards into a 13-inch radius to frame the septic tank lids. And I couldn't do it with standard heating blankets. So I had a special tank built. We spent a ton of money on this and I still have it. It's an immersion tank. So my son and I were out trying to bend these boards and we just couldn't get it. So I finally cranked the fluid up to 300 degrees and the boards were so hot, the bottoms of the boards were completely blistered, but the tops were floating so they weren't getting ruined. So we finally took these boards and we started forming them and we're like, Calvin's like, Dad, what's happening? I go, I don't know, just keep going, because we were able to get 50% of the board in the form and it was perfect. And then by the time we got to 75%, the board had cooled so much we couldn't get the other 25%. So we weren't able to get a full circle on a 13-inch radius, but we were able to get half circles, which I just cut them up and we called it a win. And then so what I did was I just used 2 half circles and then I was able to create lids, and I used this stuff called nylon sheet, and we made these really cool solid lids that come up, so when they need to pump the tank, they have complete access. They pull the lids out, and all the deck boards, I figured out how to make them all keep straight. When you drop the lid back in, they lock in. I put some cleats on the bottom of the panels, so when you drop it in, it lines up with the joists that were underneath the deck, and the joists were not removable. The joists, I had to keep the joists installed in these frames so that you could actually have support for the panel, and then it kind of locks them in place so they can't turn. Because that would have bugged me if you're looking down the straight lines of the deck and then you had the panels turn the wrong way. So unless you go around and doorbell ditch the crop circles, I could see how you could get them all mixed up, but usually they just stay put. And then we had some curved benches and a really cool pattern. The colors they chose, I was able to do it reminds me kind of an Asian pattern where there's like a line here and a line there, and it's not really symmetrical. It's kind of asymmetrical, but it turned out really cool. That deck also won an award. Actually, the deck before it won an award, and that deck also won an award, first place. So this deck won first place in its category, and then it also won best of show. So extremely proud of that. Took the best awards of the season on that particular build. Okay, you ready for the last one? This deck, I don't even think I need to look at on my phone because it's the screensaver of my computer. It's the most impressive thing I've ever built. And I absolutely love this deck. The lady, when I went on the initial consultation, she's like, I just want a badass deck. I'm like, cool, okay. The problem was the building department. The building department took over 9 months to get the building permit. And this lady, they had her in tears twice, trying to get permission to build. Once we got the permission to build, the rest of it went pretty good and it turned out amazing. We did a dock with it as well, but the curves were the most important part of this deck. The circles, the surface borders, the curved glass, planning it out so that the curves, that when you do curved glass, you can't serpentine. It has to only go one way. So I had laid out the glass and I had 3 serpentine pieces of glass designed in this deck, and I showed the video on Instagram, and the glass guy calls me, goes, hey, I'm like, yeah, what's up, man? I'm ready, man. I got all my templates made, spent all day. Took me 8 hours to figure this out. I got it ready. He goes, you can't do that with this glass. I'm like, huh? What do you mean? He's like, I can't double bend glass. I can only go one direction. He says, you have to lay the whole thing out over. So the next, I was crushed. I was crushed. But sometimes, you know, hindsight, right? So I went back to the drawing board and I redid the layout. The next day, it took me another day, got all the templates made and got them shipped to him so that he could make all the glass. The staircase glass took 2 tries. The first set I wasn't happy with. So I was able to refit, redesign and send them to him and say, this radius is off. So he remade those for me for $4,500. But I think it was worth it in the end because it's beautiful. So all the glass, the curved glass, we did an axe throwing board on the back of this area in the back of the deck so she could throw her axes onto these log wedges, and I heat bent this circle that she could mount put the logs up on and then throw her axes or whatever, and then, you know, you can take that log down and put a new one on it. And I put a backer board on so that it doesn't damage the deck unless you throw over the wall and happen to land on the deck. All the inlet lighting, that deck is my all-time favorite, probably my all-time favorite build ever. Man, it's probably, like I said, it's probably the greatest thing I've ever built. And hopefully I get a chance to do 1 or 2 more before the end of my career. So those are some of my favorite decks that I've ever built. If you like this video, don't forget, hit that subscribe button and that bell icon. And if you go to our Instagram page and scroll back several years, you will find these builds in documentation on our page. So thanks again, guys. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.